Welcome back to Peer-Guided DBT Lessons, provided by DBT Skills Application, Peers Helping Peers. This week's lesson, marked 2-1 in our Distress Tolerance module, we'll be looking at an introduction to distress tolerance. Please keep in mind that we're simply peers helping peers, working together to bring about more peaceful, constructive, and ultimately happier lives. In other words, a life worth living. So what is distress tolerance? Distress tolerance is the ability to survive a crisis or distress without making the situation worse. DBT distress tolerance skills are skillful techniques that can be used to help make tolerance and effective survival possible. So let's take a look at stressors, stress, and distress. According to Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, a stressor is a stimulus that causes stress. And stress is a state resulting from a stressor, especially one of bodily or mental tension resulting from factors that tend to alter an existent equilibrium. Distress is pain or suffering affecting the body, a bodily part, or the mind. Distress implies an external and usually temporary cause of great physical or mental strain and stress, whereas agony suggests pain too intense to be borne. Typical distress is not discomfort too intense to bear. Only the extreme limits of distress would fit that definition. Without the stimulus of a stressor, we could not feel the motivating tension or push or pull towards action to reduce that tension to bring us back into a comfortable equilibrium. Stress is a motivator, and stressors are required for motivation. So let's take a look at some external stressors with resources to meet motivation effectiveness. Some of these external stressors might be financial or economical, family responsibility, health issues, social expectations, and time limits. And some of these resources to meet motivation effectiveness might be social support, habits, coping skills, beliefs, and personal resources. These same external stressors, for example, financial or economical, family responsibility, health issues, social expectations, and time limits, without resources to meet these stressors, can be the cause of distress. It is only when we are unable to act on that stimulus to relieve the stress it causes that it becomes a problem for us. Another person could have exactly the same stressors that were a motivator to those who had the resources to effectively respond to the stress as it pressed for action, but without the ability to effectively respond. Even if the stress is the same for both, if the second one does not have the resource to act upon that stress, it causes that person distress rather than motivation. The stress response chart to the right will explain how our recourses to respond to stressors affects our level of motivation. Starting without enough motivation, going through the continuum to extreme distress. The first three on our chart represent stressors with available resources to effectively respond. Starting with number 1, disinterested. Not enough stimulating stressors to motivate, and they include unmotivated, unalert, uninvolved, bored, and frustrated. And number 2, effective. Stimulating stressors with resources to reduce stress. They include motivated, alert, involved, stimulated, creative, decisive, and effective. And number 3, our optimal stress response with stronger pressing stressors with resources to reduce stress. And they include more motivated, alert, involved, stimulated, creative, decisive, and effective. The following 3 on our chart represent the effects of stressors applied when the person does not have the ability to do what the pressures are pushing them to do. And starting with number 1, overwhelmed, stimulating stressors without ability to reduce stress. And they might include reduced effectiveness, reduced alertness, difficulty concentrating, indecisiveness, and overload. And number 2, irritable with stronger stimulating stressors without ability to reduce stress. And they might include burdened, irritability, anxiousness, confusion, and fatigue. And number 3, burnout with stronger pressing stressors without ability to reduce stress. And they might include exhaustion and burnout. So let's take a look at distress. Distress is a part of life that every person will face at some point in their lives. There is no way to avoid it. We all go through situations at some time or another where we have stressors that elicit upsetting emotions, in which we're not able to take any effective action to ease the stress the stressor is causing. Current stress without resources. We all face situations in our daily lives in which we have a stressor stimulus to which we do not have the resources. In other words, time, money, social support, coping skills, etc., available to respond in a way that will restore our equilibrium. We cannot do what we cannot do, no matter how pressing the stressor is. The stronger the stressors push us to act in a manner that would relieve the pressure, to which we are not able to accomplish, the higher the level of distress will climb. Past events. If we're caught in a memory, guilt for a prior action, a flashback of a previous trauma, or mourning a previous loss, etc., these can still act as a stressor for us. The problem with these stressors is there is no response to that stimulus that we can give to restore equilibrium. The past is totally out of our control. Future worries. When we project our focus into the future and begin to anticipate stressors that we believe might occur, this alone causes a current stressor. This is also something we are unable to respond to in order to restore our equilibrium. We have no control in the future because we're not there yet. Distress intolerance defined. One definition, according to a scientific medical study recorded in the U.S. National Library of Medicine, according to R. Catherine McHugh, Ph.D., distress intolerance, or DI, is defined as the perceived inability to manage negative emotional and somatic states, and reflects a trait-like interpretation of and behavioral response to these states. This means that people with distress intolerance believe that they are not able to fully experience uncomfortable, unpleasant, or aversive emotions or sensations. This perceived inability to tolerate distress often causes an extreme fear of experiencing those emotions considered to be intolerable or unbearable. As a result of that fear that the emotions would overwhelm and be unmanageable, a person with distress intolerance will usually feel a frantic, desperate need to escape uncomfortable emotions. It is not the intensity of the unpleasant emotion itself that determines a person's level of distress intolerance, but rather how unmanageable and unbearable the emotion seems to the person experiencing it, and how strongly their desire is to avoid or escape it. So what are some causes of distress intolerance? The continuing scientific studies suggest that distress intolerance is set into motion by both biological and environmental factors. So biological factors. Some people actually experience distressing emotions more easily, at a stronger intensity, and that last for a longer duration than others. This means that through a possible inheritance trait, some people experience unsettling emotions as more painful, which actually causes them to have more difficulty coping with the experience. Approximately 1 in 10 have the biological tendency towards distress intolerance, which can be set in motion by responses and habits formed early in life. Environmental factors. The second developmental component, environment, is learned through personal experiences that can shape how a person deals with their emotions. Some people simply are never taught skills needed to be able to effectively tolerate distress. Some people are taught that unpleasant emotions and any response elicited by them are bad. Some people were taught by example to avoid or escape painful emotions. Some people teach themselves unhelpful ways to escape their emotions through temporary reinforcements. People who have survived a severe childhood trauma are more apt to continue their suffering through the development of distress intolerance. Now let's look at distress intolerance beliefs. Although distress intolerance involves many factors that we have no control over, such as genetics, past experience, and personality type, it doesn't end there. The first step in altering the overwhelming distress created by feeling we do not have the ability to control the level of intolerance to natural distress in our lives is to change what we believe about that distressing element. It is the beliefs that we have developed about aversive emotions that have kept us locked into distress intolerance. The beliefs that give distress intolerance the power to keep a tight hold on us are usually centered on 4 specific types of beliefs about an unpleasant emotion. Number 1, this is too unpleasant. I want it to go away. I hate feeling like this. I have to find a way to stop feeling like this. I must get rid of this feeling. Something has to make it go away. It is going to stay this awful forever. Number 2, what I am feeling will drive me insane. They are dangerous. This will make me lose my mind. If this doesn't stop, I will lose control. I can't cope with my emotions. Feeling this way is too intense. It is dangerous. Number 3, what I am feeling is too overwhelming. This feeling is unbearable. I can't face this emotion. I can't bear feeling like this. I can't stand this feeling. I can't tolerate this kind of emotion. And number 4, feeling this way proves that I am inadequate. I must be a pathetically weak person to feel this. Feeling this is bad. It is wrong. It is stupid to feel like this. Feeling like this is a sign of weakness. This feeling is unacceptable. When we buy into these beliefs, we take an unpleasant emotion that we feel and feed into it until it becomes an emotional experience that is highly distressing. These types of beliefs are called catastrophizing. cognitive distortion in cognitive therapy, because we take an unpleasant emotion and add our thoughts and beliefs to it until it grows from something we dislike that is unpleasant into a full-blown catastrophe in our minds. Distress intolerance interferes with living a life worth living. It can make any emotional discomfort we are experiencing even worse. It can encourage us to make decisions based on escaping a feeling that in the long run only increases our current problems. There is a big difference between a person disliking uncomfortable emotions, yet understanding and accepting that they are an inescapable part of life, so therefore learn to ride through them, and a person that experiences uncomfortable emotions as unbearable, with an overwhelming compulsion to make them go away. Now let's look at damaging distress escape techniques. A person's automatic reaction to distress is to do something to alleviate the suffering. This urge to respond with an impulsive behavior may even be extremely strong. Even though some of our impulses have seemed to work in the short term by giving us temporary reduction of our distress, in the long run they can actually make it worse. Responding to these impulsive urges are a very unhealthy way to deal with strong emotions. Between what happens to us and how we react to what happens to us is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose. Stephen R. Covey. Now let's look at some methods that people may have learned to rely on to escape their mental distress. Number 1, avoidance. The practice of staying away from or avoiding anything that they anticipate may cause anxious or painful emotions that have been associated with whatever is being avoided. Number 2, dissociation. A separation and disconnection from the here and now. It is a loss of touch with one's immediate surroundings. Number 3, repression. Repressed memories would be forgetting details of an incident that triggers painful emotions. Number 4, self-numbing. Self-emotional numbing is the process of, both mentally and emotionally, shutting out one's awareness of feelings. Number 5, self-harm. Self-harm could be causing oneself physical pain in the attempt to distract from a psychological pain. This could also include suicidal ideation and attempts wishing for a permanent release from emotional distress. Number 6, impulsive actions. Impulsive actions would be giving into a sudden urge to engage in any unhelpful, unhealthy, or destructive behavior in the attempt to release some of the pressure caused by distress. Number 7, denial. Refusal to admit the reality of something. We would rather not go through the pain of believing and accepting. Number 8, distortion. Forcing perceived reality of circumstances to fit needs and wishes. Number 9, passive aggression. Acting out on aggression in a passive or indirect manner. And number 10, sublimination. Converting unpleasant emotions into productive actions. The paradox. Research confirms that the more we struggle mentally to avoid, escape, or stop feeling our emotional distress, the emotional distress actually intensifies and the distress is magnified. Struggling to escape emotional distress is about as effective as thrashing around in quicksand in a struggle to escape it. The harder we struggle to get away from it, the deeper we sink into it. Impulsively avoiding discomfort paradoxically prolongs your mental distress. It is important to remember, even though our automatic reaction to suffering is to alleviate the distress, we do not have to give in to our urges and react to everything. We can just tolerate it. And now, distress tolerant skills. Distress tolerant skills are exclusively designed to tolerate the moment as it is, tolerating any emotion that presents itself without engaging in impulsive and self-destructive behaviors. All of us at times face situations that we have no control over, that there is just nothing we can do except endure the situation until it resolves on its own. Some of these can cause us tremendous pain. In these situations, these skills can be critically valuable. These are a set of skills that will help us survive, cope, and manage intense emotional states, those strong emotions that we feel unable to tolerate, without making things worse. They are used to reduce destructive, impulsive behaviors. So let's look at the goals of distress-tolerant skills. Number 1, crisis situation survival. Without making matters worse, without turning to and engaging in maladaptive, ineffective coping skills. Number 2, reality acceptance. To get unstuck from suffering and with the ability to replace it with a more manageable ordinary pain with the possibility of progressing, moving forward. And number 3, freedom from damaging reactions. Letting go of the feeling that it is necessary to satisfy the edicts of our own urges, intense emotions, and desires. So, what is a crisis? When you have a serious, unsolvable problem, at least you can't solve it right now. When your serious, unsolvable problem is causing highly stressful emotions, especially if you are too emotionally dysregulated to have success with another skill. When you feel pressure to solve the unsolvable problem and it is difficult to stop trying. When the distress caused by the unsolvable problem will be short term. If you are always in distress, it is not a crisis. It is your life. Problems I can or cannot solve. If I cannot solve the problem, I can keep trying, making things worse. I can change my perspective of the problem. I can tolerate the problem. I can stay miserable. So let's take a look at things within my control. My words, my actions, my beliefs, my values, my efforts, my ideas, my mistakes, my reactions, my words, my fairness, my risks, my honesty, my judgments, my interpretations, and my perspectives, and some things outside my control. Other people's words, other people's beliefs, other people's efforts, other people's mistakes, other people's words, other people's honesty, other people's interpretations and perspectives, other people's judgments, other people's fairness, other people's reactions, other people's ideas, other people's values, and other people's actions. Be sure to check out the video description in the comments below. You'll find a link to the website lesson that accompanies this video. You will also find links to the handouts and worksheets created to complement this video. And while you're there, if you found this video helpful, be sure to like it. Next week in our peer-guided DBT lessons distress tolerance module, we'll be looking at pros and cons and urge surfing. Please be sure to check out our YouTube channel where our entire DBT course is now available. Thank you for watching and hope to see you next week. Bye for now.